Welcome to part two of this live stream slideshow presentation. If you haven't already watched part one, go ahead and follow the link down below. This is halfway through the presentation. Of course, I am off the grid using the power of the sun, but putting together this presentation, presenting it at 11:30 at night, running the generator as we ease into the second half of this particular presentation. So in the first part, we talked about the cycles of war and conflict that have been documented by researchers throughout history. And so now we're going to speculate and take a closer look at the idea, the concept of the powers that be using the solar cycle for their own benefit, for their own agenda. Now, I believe that events and even certain panics or wars are staged during solar peaks to provoke a certain emotional response when people are already very emotional. And that leads to a certain outcome, especially when you add in propaganda and disinformation into the mix. So it's a traditional example of problem reaction solution. And it would benefit researchers out there already familiar with such a concept to look at the pattern recognition when we see particular events staged in our world to also look at the solar activity. Launching certain projects during solar peaks and celestial events based on their belief that their luck will be magnified. Moving certain goals forward during solar minimums during times in which the least amount of protest is expected. The example I gave in video one was Occupy Wall Street not even kicking off until 2011 when the banker bailout was actually late 2008 when people were still, a lot of people very ecstatic about that particular election. I believe the dark occultists behind the powers that be understand the makeup of the human body and the stress responses. The emotional center is affected by a manufactured event, fill in the blank here. It can be easier to direct a society to either an external or internal conflict. Periods in which humans are more likely to commit suicide might also be times in which susceptible human beings may be persuaded by authorities or rulers to die for a cause. They have mapped out our buttons as they've mapped out our minds and the best times to push them. Princeton University study found that human thought can actually impact computers and collectively synchronize. We were also talking in part one about the evidence that during the attacks of 9/11, there were changes for whatever reason in the Earth's magnetic field, whether it was caused by consciousness, as some people believe, or by something else. We see here this chart, the magnetic flux on the actual day of 9/11, the actual periods. So when the towers were actually struck, we saw magnetic flux. So these are the realities that we have to face. Some humans are more insusceptible to influence than others and seek liberation mentally, spiritually, and physically. We're all different. Other humans seem easier to control and naturally take commands or fall under the spell of influence in some way. Human beings that are out of alignment with their own truth seem to be the most susceptible to having their perceptions and emotions used against them, pulling them further and further into a deep state of serfdom. You can even say state worship and spiritual bankruptcy, but also those that want to riot and just destroy things, whatever side they're on. Emotional frenzies. And we see this in the streets now more than this period in which I put this together in 2013. We will continue to exist in a reality where the forces of darkness use members of our own society as cannon fodder, as long as there is a pool of susceptible minds willing to be directed into action by authority or external influence, mind control. This is what I believed from 2013 would be the current game plan for the remainder of this cycle. New fabricated external and internal threats, manufactured civil war over gun rights at that time. That was the raging issue. Or to put people into a defensive position by baiting gun owners and others into reactionary behaviors. Certainly saw it, come and take it on social media. And I was saying, don't be admitting what you got just because the government's baiting you, invoking responses of anger and defensive posturing, the launching of new wars, conflicts, military interventions in Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. And I believe we're seeing that now. What do you think? Continue to disrupt American image and long-term national security. I was giving my projections before Trump was on the scene. It's not about him. It's about looking at the trends. Use economic crisis to further globalize world economies, selling off critical assets to global partners in crime. These actions, by design, aim to further weaken basic infrastructure. And look at our economy now. This is some art that I had done in 2012, representing a collage, a mix of various events that I think are going to be coming together in the future. A conflict with China, a solar maximum, a potential economic collapse, food riots, the American refugee experience, people fighting with authorities in the streets. We're certainly seeing people fighting in the streets, if not necessarily authorities. And of course, in the upper right hand side, you see some sort of entity in the sky. This is what I still believe to be the agenda for Sunspot Cycle 25. This was created in 2013, 2021 to 2025 projected timeline. Manufacture mass event that turns the entire world against the United States. That includes some current allies. So it could be an attack on a nation that results in a massive death toll. What's always come to me for years is about 1 million dead. And it seems to be something other than the Middle East conflicts of present. And now we look at the current situation in Asia. Could that be it? What will the current president do? There seems to be an agenda to turn the whole world against the United States by design during the next solar cycle, leading to a staging of a controlled World War III scenario between Russia, China, and the United States, leading to potentially at some point the dispatch of foreign troops to the United States to quell civil unrest or circumstances that lead to foreign occupation. You may potentially also see a staged breakup of the federal government to make way for a merger with NATO countries or breakup of the U.S., where other superstate nations, China, Russia, control potential areas, maybe states along the West Coast. And we could see after this war potentially a creation of a new UN or League of Democracies, new world government to bring a promise of peace to end the war of all wars. So now let's talk a little bit about how solar activity is known to impact human beings. Chronobiology is the study of the sun's effect on biology. And we can see in this chart the various influences over our lives and our body during particular parts of the day. How solar activity impacts human beings. This is must have information for people wanting to know why they're feeling different during geomagnetic storms. Solar energy is powerful yet neutral and brings waves of change. The sun brings a cycle of birth and death or creation and destruction. Whether the changes are positive or negative depends on the level of consciousness of the individual experiencing that change. Different solar flares can bring different levels of intensity that the body responds to differently each time. This would also relate to where we are on the planet, in the same way that the pupil responds to different shades of light. Knowledge of how the sun impacts us is key to making the cycle work for us instead of against us. Solar flares affect the central nervous system, the stomach lining, and all brain activity, including equilibrium, along with human behavior and all psychophysiological, mental, emotional, physical responses. The endocrine system is also affected, which affects the pituitary glands, the adrenaline glands, the thyroid glands, as well as our hormones. Not everyone responds to solar activity in the same way. Many factors are involved, including where they are on the planet, genetics, and state of mind, body, and spirit. It takes about 48 to 72 hours for a solar flare to impact the Earth, but it only takes about 9.9 minutes for a solar shift on the sun to affect the human electrical system, the human system. How many of you have woken up and checked spaceweather.com? right as the solar flare was coming in, or were awakened and didn't know why. It's an experience that I've had for many years, and it led to this kind of research. New Scientist reported back in 2008 on the human response to solar activity. Does the Earth's magnetic field cause suicides? And that is the headline from 2008. The Institute of North Industrial Ecology Problems in Russia looked at activity in the Earth's geomagnetic field from 1948 to 1997. And they found that the geomagnetic peaks matched up with peaks in the number of mood disorders, depression, anxiety, bipolar, and even suicides in the northern Russian city over the same period. Kelly Posner, a psychiatrist at Columbia, said, quote, geomagnetic storms can desynchronize circadian rhythms and melatonin production, sleep state. The circadian regulatory system depends upon repeated environmental cues to synchronize internal clocks. Magnetic fields may be one of these environmental cues. The pineal gland is sensitive to magnetic fields, also known as the third eye. Geomagnetic storms cause the gland to produce excessive melatonin, and melatonin is the brain's built in downer that helps us sleep. Now, this is a Washington Times editorial. Solar flares. The sun touches our psyche. And this is, again, from 2012, a mainstream publication discussing the emotional impact. Symptoms, effects of solar flares, or increased geomagnetic storms. Solar flares can cause us to have emotional outbursts, be nervous, anxious, queasy, worrisome, jittery, dizzy, irritable, lethargic. It can trigger short term memory loss, nausea, grief, prolonged headaches or heart pressure, body aches, dizziness, heart palpitations, and trouble with all forms of communication, both human and technological. It may be hard to focus, remember, or formulate words. Sleep is often disrupted, and a sense of time can be altered. There have been reports of visual disturbances, inner ear issues, buzzing in the ears, throat or thyroid issues, cold feet, and even a weird symptom of having dryness of the tongue. Bursts of energy are followed by drops of energy. Solar flares can also trigger an explosion of creativity or spiritual insight, leading to breakthroughs in projects, ideas, or consciousness. A desire to create something new somewhere may also be linked to mass migration patterns during solar maximum. There have also been studies drawing links between heightened geomagnetic storms and deeper states of lucid dreaming. The birth and death cycle of solar activity appears to have a profound effect or catalyst for change, all kinds of change. Now, back on April 11th on Facebook, I engaged in a poll as I prepared my presentation, and I asked a number of individuals how they were feeling that particular April 11th solar flare. Everyone is insane and evil everywhere at once, says one. Another. I feel very annoyed and my attention span sucks. Right now, I have my shield up, but there's definitely those around me here at the coffee shop that are being affected by something coming in from the ether right now. The world has been a bit crazy, I'd say. I don't think I have equipment sensitive enough to feel its effects. Total mood swing from a restaurant worker on corner where I live. He threw a plate for no reason and it shattered, cutting another worker. I know. Crazy. My neighbor threw a major fit an hour ago, cussed a blue streak at me. I had a nasty migraine all day long. Maybe it's the flare? Many emotional and personal difficulties seem to have been more intense during the solar flares, for me anyway. I also had a terrible headache. I woke up again with a milder version this morning. Four separate people told me in person about a recent meltdown with their mother. Now, does the sun have any positive effects? One asks. Now, let's look at this as we contemplate that and contemplate the idea of making the energy work for us instead of against us. Now, humans have an energy field, an aura around their body, and other energy centers that transmit and receive energy and information. It's also been verified by science that electromagnetic fields affect human cells. Rhythm brain waves, fluctuations in electric activity may allow brain to form thoughts and memories. They've also discovered that a magnetic field applied to the brain can alter people's sense of morality. Now, there's a book that I actually purchased recently, and I put together this information from available information on the internet without having come across these books first. So, in a follow up report, I'll give you some information that comes out of Solar Revolution, a little bit more. Right now, I'm just going to give you a taste. So, this was written in German back in 2009 and published in English in 2012, and it shows that brain waves are affected by electromagnetic fields. It's also known that the heart is the most powerful source of electromagnetic energy in the human body. So, as we hear people talk about being in the heart, right, not just the mind, but being in the sacred heart or the heart space, there seems to be a purpose for that with its relation to the strength around the human body. It's believed that the heart is about 100,000 times stronger electrically and up to 5,000 times stronger magnetically than the brain. The heart has a more powerful field than the brain, but the brain has its own field. And of course, there's a book on psychic protection that elaborates on the field around the mind and the field around the body. And they both need to be maintained for healthy mind, body, and spirit. Rural Pain, that who I discussed in 2000, or in the last video in part one, he wrote an article regarding the solar cycles and the cycles of war, but that's not his only ebook. He's also been involved in studying what he calls the spin force. Rural Pain conducted a series of experiments on what he has coined the spin force, a rotational or spin force around the human body and all living organisms. It can be detected with a simple and inexpensive device, little typo there, that he calls the biofield meter. In his book, which you can actually find this for free on the internet, in his book, The Spin Force, he describes how he came to discover this rotational force and how its strength tended to increase during magnetic storms and reverse direction during full or new moons. He found that excited emotions made the field stronger, while meditation quieted the field. He came to believe that this unique spiraling spin force is a fundamental force made up of subatomic particles, serving as a basis for quantum theory. He writes that almost all stellar bodies, from asteroids to galaxies, rotate, including subatomic particles. His book, The Spin Force, documents his studies and illustrates how anyone can verify the existence of a spin force around living organisms in an hour by using simple household materials. Some of the designs are also used to measure the psychokinetic abilities of someone attempting to rotate a pyramid structure with magnetics placed in four directions and suspended in a bottle by a string. There's various studies were conducted by Burrell on the ability of the energy centers in the hands to move the object. I'm actually going to have to free up some disk space for just a moment as I continue with this presentation. And that'll just take a few seconds here as we go into this folder. And I thank you for your patience. And going back to our report, so this is an illustration, or this is a picture of this biometer in a small jar. He also makes references to pendulums in the magnetic force regarding that, and you can learn more from his particular PDF. More images from Mitch Batros: magnetism, the sun, the earth, and human consciousness. Our hypothalamus and pituitary glands tune into the new frequencies coming in from the solar flares. And within each of our cells, there are receptors in the protein channels that pick up vibrations from the outside. Here we have an illustration of the pineal gland, and this is what is believed to be known about the pineal gland: regulating circadian rhythm and melatonin production, and of which has had increasingly been referred to as the third eye. This is very sensitive to changes in the magnetic field. It is about the size of a pea, and it's located roughly at the center of the head. This glandular structure is believed to be the receiving point of higher mind consciousness, and has been uh, revered and symbolized in subtle ways throughout history. Affected by light and electromagnetic activity, which in effect produces an excess of melatonin, which in turn causes the gland to produce excess melatonin, contains a concentration of magnetite. Pineal gland is also linked to the secretion of DMT. Studies of melatonin production in the pineal gland. Bright light inhibits melatonin production by inhibiting nerve tone to the pineal, where darkness has the opposite effect by increasing neural activity to the gland, stimulates the production of melatonin. This effect on light is dependent both upon its wavelength and its intensity. Electromagnetic energies and magnetic fields, including that of the Earth, influence melatonin production, and has been shown to control the intensity and nature of melatonin production to the same degree as exposure to light does. Magnetic fields of this general type have been found to directly stimulate pineal tissue. In case you didn't know, there's a reason why laptop devices or tablets keep people up. It's that magnetic energy interacting with human consciousness. So you might not want to sleep too close to your cell phone if you want a good, deep night's sleep. Studies on melatonin production in the pineal gland. Studies have also been conducted on the connection between electromagnetic influences upon melatonin at the time of birth and development later in life. Any perpetuations in electric and magnetic fields that cause a reduction in normal melatonin levels in humans have been found to have significant psychological, physiological, and pathophysiological consequences. It's been found that exposure to intense light at the time of birth alters later melatonin secretion patterns. It's also been found that the only significant factor that correlates with the development of epilepsy in young adults is the level of geomagnetic activity for 2 days after birth. And geomagnetic variables have also been considered to be a trigger for birth. There's also a significant correlation between the level of magnetism on and up for 3 days before the birth of male children. So this is also a very interesting scientific breakthrough. This is from 1992, I believe, Magnetic Crystals, Guides for Animals Found in Human Beings. An intriguing claim that human brain cells possess crystals of highly magnetic minerals known as magnetite was described today by Dr. Joseph, professor of the California Institute of Technology. The 38-year-old geobiologist said he believed that magnetite crystals enabled animals from birds to whales to navigate by using the Earth's magnetic field. He said he doubted that they supported any sensory capability in humans, although he suspected that they might account for the possible influence of strong electromagnetic fields on human health. Proof of magnetic antennas in the brain: 5 million magnetite crystals per gram of brain cell, 100 million magnetite crystals per gram of cerebral cortex. Magnetic crystals can sense very weak signals and react to them. Magnetite reacts over 1 million times more sensitive to external magnetite fields than any other biological matter. This means that external magnetic fields directly influence human brains. This can affect and disturb many functions of our metabolism. Magnetite has shown that it can act as a transducer, linking ambient electromagnetic activity to cellular function. Magnetite has been found concentrated in the pineal gland where there is a concentration of these particular magnetic particles. Magnetite has also been identified as the substance in which migratory animals are able to detect the Earth's magnetic field. It's also believed that some of the massive die-offs that we've seen may be caused by changes in the Earth's magnetic field, and birds and whales and fish ending up in waters and parts of the globe that normally they don't go to because they're following the Earth's magnetic field. Magnetite may provide a basis for magnetic broadcasting of our brain's information. This could be tied to telepathy. This discovery further indicates that we are both transmitters and receivers of subtle energy and consciousness. Looking at the bird's built in compass, there's a concentration of magnetite in the upper beak skin of pigeons, homing pigeons. High concentrations of iron particles have been found. Scientists found that as the bird changed direction, the particles changed their alignment as a needle in a compass turns to point north. The first recorded use of pigeons for airmail was in 2900 BC by the Egyptians. During World War II, of the 52 medals presented for animal bravery in the war, 32 were presented to pigeons. Champion pigeons fly up to 500 miles in one day. So we're more than what we know, far more than what we know. Yet many people don't know that there are other influences impacting our consciousness. But it's something very real. And the major changes that we're seeing now within human society is riding this wave. Now, the Mail Online reported in June 2011 that scientists have proved that humans really do have a sixth sense that lets them detect magnetic fields. By putting a protein from the human retina into fruit flies, researchers noticed that the insect modified its flight just as if the eye had not been altered. The team used wild fruit flies and replaced their vision of cryptochrome with the human equivalent, the protein of the special cells in the eye. So the study suggests that the sixth sense does exist in humans, but we may not be aware of it. So people could be responding to what they think are vibes, that they're picking up on energy, and they may not understand what they're picking up on. Scientists have found that the human eye also emits light. Research published in the Journal of Brain Research shows that the mammalian eye actually emits light, biophotons, which contain energy and information, wave particle complementary of light. There's a reason why you rather watch someone on camera than just look at an image, capable of transforming our understanding of one another and ourselves. This validates the belief that the of photonic energies is amplifying our cellular memory, causing various elements of our divine blueprint to leak into our waking consciousness. As a result, many people are beginning to remember their soul purpose and are suddenly driven to make changes in their lives to realign with a sense of higher purpose. Another ramification of the influx of photonic energy is that since it represents a higher frequency, it increases the power, speed, and manifestation capacity of our thoughts. We are quite literally able to exercise instantaneous manifestation. Whatever we create instantaneously. We have never before experienced this heightened level of manifestation potential. All the more reason why they try to redirect us. And I hope this is starting to make more sense. Photonic energy blends with the vibratory frequency of our thoughts. So it's vitally important that we place our attention on what we want to create. Now, hold this in your consciousness. Rather than what we do not want to manifest in our lives, we will manifest rapidly in the direction of our thoughts. And it is up to us to decide where to direct our attention. The increased frequency and intensity of solar flares is helping to break apart old patterns that are no longer needed so that new patterns can emerge. Now, here is some information that I transcribed from Manly P. Hall on his presentation on the magnetic influence over the human body. And this was presented, I believe, in the 1960s, or was it the 1970s? But the late Manly P. Hall contributed this piece of information to what we've been discussing. Quote, now we think of the magnetic field as surrounding the entire structure of the body. This is only a phase of it. Each part of the human body has a magnetic field. Each of the organs has its own field. And all these fields together constitute the grand magnetic field that surrounds a complete person. Each unit within the individual has its survival in a unit of energy. And this unit of energy is present in the small subdivision of imaginable space. The moment we break rules, we damage that magnetic flow. This relates to morality, by the way. We've got to keep the laws of nature. Sometimes you hear about natural law. And these, in turn, are the laws of God, or the magnetic field fails. It can fail because of physical indifferences, which reduce its integrity and reduces its power. It could be wasted on riotous living, which is common for us these days. It can be variously destroyed by booze, attitudes, fears, complexes. It can be destroyed or damaged by alcohol, drugs, narcotics, all kinds of things. But if this field is damaged, it immediately reacts in health. The magnetic fields are absolutely honest. There is no way of making them dishonest. The only way we can do is to destroy or limit the manifestation of their integrity. If we break the rule, we lose the benefit of that particular energy. When we lose that benefit, we then say that evil has come to us, but it's not an evil thing that's come to us. It's the failure of a good thing to be developed, purified, and intensified. Now, what if, and these are my thoughts, what if solar activity is a catalyst for the travel of souls into the planet via new births and exits from the planet via new wars? What if we are all coexisting in a spiritual biological video game where we each uniquely work to reach higher levels as we experience the nature of cause and effect in this physical reality? What if our actions and thoughts dictate the nature of reality that we will incarnate into? What if our actions and thoughts from our prior lives got us here? Nothing by accident, nothing by chance. A system of karmic laws creating a system in which we create our future realities via our actions and thoughts. Now, going back to Maurice Cotterell, author of Future Sciences on Coast to Coast 2013, quote, what we have to realize is that the body is the devil, which is carbon-based, which is the atomic number of the carbon, which is 6 electrons, 6 protons, 6 neutrons, or 666. In the Bible, the number of the beast is 666, and the soul inside this lump of meat is God. So every human being is half God and half devil, and when we're born, we have a choice. We can either be good or we can be bad. If we are good, our soul's voltage increases during our lifetime, and it will go back to God in heaven. If our soul's voltage is reduced during our lifetime on earth because we hate each other, then the voltage will go down and it will not have the impetus to leave the gravitational field of the earth or the magnetic field of the earth. And this is very interesting when I came across this because it seems to align with the idea of evolving beyond this soul prison or matrix. So it will attach to another group of developing biological cells, for example, like a worm, a dog, a butterfly, or a flower, or an oak tree. So what we see is that the body is only in a human being at one moment in time. It's not actually a human being, it's a soul in disguise. It's God in disguise. Every living thing is God in disguise. And once we realize this, we realize we are one people. Notice those forces trying to tear us apart. There are lots of mechanisms in the soul world. For example, souls can fragment and shatter just like we have mechanisms in the physical world, for example, a nervous breakdown. There are mechanisms in the soul world where we can have souls shatter. And instead of being, say, 5 volts, it comes back as 1005 mini volts or souls. I've talked before about the fracturing of consciousness and the idea of a soul group family. The idea that we fell back into this earth and we're evolving outwards, and my thoughts seem to parallel Maurice's thoughts, going back to Maurice. So it comes back as a nest of ants, or shoal of fish, or flock of birds. And this is why all the birds flock together and why all the fish move together as a shoal as they turn to the right and the left. It's because it's the same soul, as we also look at humanity and the split in consciousness, the extreme dark and light showing itself in the humans alive today. Maurice continues, quote, we have to realize that we have a choice between accepting ideas from the body, the 5 senses, or to accept ideas that come from God into our electromagnetic energy bank or our soul. What few people realize is that God is in every one of us. We are all God. We are all the same energy. And when we die, some of us go back to God this time. Some of us will reincarnate, but eventually we'll all go back to God. The ancients believed there are 3 transitory states. One is the God world where God lives. One is the soul world, which is divided up into purgatory and hell. And it's a bit like a factory where purgatory is like the reception for hell, and hell itself is the factory. If we are on planet Earth, we can live on planet Earth in this incarnation, and this is like the reception. This is purgatory, where our sins are purged. Now I believe this because all the decoded pictures that the Mayan left behind, and the Egyptians and the Celtics and the ancient Chinese, all these people that worshiped the sun thousands of years ago left this knowledge behind. All I had to do was decode it. Once I decoded it, I can see the messages that they were trying to convey. All we have to do is get the energy, purify our souls, and go to heaven. There's nothing difficult about it once we understand it. Here's a quote from Mark Passio on Earth being a quarantine prison for thieves. The Earth is a prison planet, but it's not a physical prison. It's a prison for souls that have stolen. All we have to do is not steal or take energy from others. So we ask ourselves, what can I do? What can I do to evolve my own consciousness? What can I do to remain balanced? What can you do? What can you do now to continue to learn about these changes that are taking place and how to mediate a situation, maintaining balance within mind, body, and spirit? And we can use the solar cycles to our advantage, both the maximum and the minimum. They both have their advantages and disadvantages. So, considering things like basic exercises to release that excess angst and energy and pressure, engaging in natural body movements that engage the natural chi, ki, prana energy within your body, within your aura. So for years, I've recommended things like martial arts, dancing, qigong, yoga. I think those things really tap into it, but it's certainly not limited to that. Traveling, camping, being in nature, creative applications of the mind, things like writing, building new structures or homes, creating art, music, documentary films. Remember, during these periods, it's important to drink plenty of water and mind your diet. Meditation is particularly critical. There's several things that you want to look at. Deep breathing, breathing with the stomach. Breathing in for several moments and release. As you breathe in and you breathe out, the stress, anxiety, breathing in, rolling with the new energy, rolling with the change, and then releasing the old. Vipassana meditation. 2002, I went on one of the Vipassana meditation retreats just outside of Portland, Oregon by about an hour. There's various videos you can watch to learn about Vipassana meditation, but deep breathing isn't the focus, but observing your breath as it is naturally. And we're going to become more equanimous. So as I describe this, breathe in and out through your nose naturally and direct your attention to the wind, the air going in and out of your nose, and observe that sensation going in and out of your nose, breathing naturally, sitting naturally. No need to actually be necessarily in a lotus position. You want to do this for a while, sit down, relax in the chair, try different positions, but this is about increasing your awareness and getting out of the monkey mind, the reactive mind. As you breathe and you observe the sensation of the air flowing naturally without controlling it in and out of your nose. As you then move your awareness to your entire head, your forehead, your face, what you're feeling, without scratching, without itching, but as you become more aware and as you become more still, you might find a greater urge to move around. And this is a process to work through that reactionary mindset. As you sweep your body, your arms, your chest, your back, your legs, and then again going back to the nose. And the ultimate destination is to become aware of the subatomic state within your body. Okay. So becoming increasingly aware as we become increasingly non-reactive to the sensations on our body. The thoughts, we watch the thoughts, but don't hang on to the thoughts. We don't try to force the thoughts to stop. We just let go of that process. So from deep breathing, and I would recommend a combination of all of this, to Vipassana meditation, and of course, a safe means of viewing the sun at sunrise and sunset. It's widely believed by the ancients that the sun directly impacts our consciousness in particular ways in which we engage in sun gazing. Some believe that human beings are capable of actually generating energy in their body from this particular practice. Now, mind you, this is not endorsed by science, and you want to be very careful with looking at the sun. But the connection between the sun gazing, and the pineal gland, as well as just the general feeling that I feel around my auric field, it's a very powerful sensation. And especially if it's in a scene like this, and you're putting your consciousness directing that towards connecting with spirit. There's also the solfeggio tones and frequencies that some people believe affects our own magnetic field in a very positive way, releasing stuck emotions, releasing fear, healing DNA, healing relationships. Finally, this is the most important. A grounding cord meditation. So it's important to get into a relaxed state. Maybe start with some deep breathing. And then observation of the breath. And then your mind's eye creating a grounding cord and connecting that to your auric field, which of course is connected to the chakras. 7 levels of the aura, 7 levels of the chakras, and connecting that to the center of the earth and release. As you also bring in the energies from the cosmos, the meeting literally of heaven and earth, releasing those stack energies with each breath that you take, and releasing that angst through your auric field down to the center of the earth, empowering your auric field, bringing balance to the levels of your aura. And there's a lot of information that you can find on the internet. There's a lot of people that don't do this. There's a lot of people that are running around ungrounded. There's a lot of people that are addicted to the internet. There's a lot of people that sometimes engage in violence during geomagnetic storms and they don't know why. There's a lot of people that feel depressed sometimes, bipolar, manic. And it's important that they understand that there are solutions available, but those solutions are within. So we turn our focus to creation and manifestation. And this is artwork from the iconic author Alex Gray. What can we do? Collective manifestation is not a new idea. And Burl Payne has studied the effects of mass meditations. The first experiment involved, this was the late 70s, an attempt to lift the space station called the Skylab into higher orbit. And I believe that was during a period in which the Skylab fell out of orbit. It was affected by a solar flare, but it was not functioning as it should. The unexpected results showed that sunspot numbers decreased about 30%, leading Burl Payne to draw a direct link between mass meditations and a calming of the sun. The second experiment involved asking people around the planet to meditate on 4 dates each year: solstices and equinoxes. On the day of the meditations or immediately afterwards, sunspot numbers were significantly reduced. The third analysis of the sunspot numbers at or immediately after the full moon meditations were done by groups around the globe. The data again showed consistent reductions in sunspot numbers at the time of meditations or just after. His conclusion: the projects carried out over 30 years clearly shows that global meditations are associated with reduced sunspot numbers. This may represent a quantum leap in human consciousness, leading to the formation of a new kind of meta consciousness entity on Earth. And read The Power of Non Thought. You can find his PDF online for more information. Now, what I want to bring up with regards to this, and I'm just going to say this briefly, the new information that's come out is that NASA has been running high atmospheric tests. They admitted 1958 to 1962, and that affected the geomagnetic field, which can affect consciousness. So we're hearing also about tests from other nations, underground tests of certain types of weapons. That can affect human consciousness in a negative way. More so, the widespread civil unrest that we're seeing. We see a connection between that and the earth changes and the increase in solar flares. There seems to be a connection between all of this. The idea of these things being divided or not being connected seems to have actually no basis in science or quantum theory. It's all connected. So when minds are connected, they can be collectively influencing the energy of the planet for the positive or the negative, using the mind's ability to affect change. So these are things to reflect upon as we reach our conclusion. We are our most powerful during these times. Mindful offensive movement over defensive reflex. Creating what is right and dismantling what is wrong. Bobbing and weaving when you can see the blows. And coming back and bouncing back, knowing your truth, speaking your truth, and the truth shall set you free. Directing the shifting in your brain to higher levels of awareness, perception, and capability. Contemplations